Welcome to the Better Online Lessons podcast, the purpose of which is to help teachers and students come together to share information and ideas in hopes that we can all have better online lessons. My name's Chris, and today I'll be chatting with drummer, educator, entrepreneur, family man, owner of Rodbell Drums Teaching Studio. Please welcome Larry Rodbell. Larry, thanks for joining me.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been excited about this.
Me too.
Mainly because you've been doing online lessons since before it was cool, whereas most of us have just been thrown into the situation, kicking and screaming. We feel like we're in over our heads. What made you want to make that switch to online lessons? How long ago was it? A few years ago?
It's been about 5-6 years ago when I started doing online lessons, yes. It was just another way to open up and connect with drummers who weren't local. Wasn't even thinking about anything that we're involved with now, but just reaching out to drummers from other states or, other parts of the state that aren't available to, come take lessons in person.
That's interesting. What gave you the idea to get started? And did you come up against any resistance from anyone else, students or, because I know a lot of, for instance, a lot of my students were kind of concerned, I don't know about online lessons. I don't think it can be done, but I think we're out here proving that it can. So what was your experience like in the beginning?
The whole thing started with just, being on social media and being inspired by my friends and colleagues who were already doing it. So, I belong to the Percussive Arts Society. So every year I'd meet with friends and talk to them about their online lessons and how they're connecting and what their setup was. And then, actually realizing that, my setup's pretty simple, pretty caveman. It's not as high tech as yours and some of the other ones out there, but I'm reaching towards that goal. But I'm just running off an iPad and just using either FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, whatever's easiest, what the easiest platform for the student is, and just make it work.
That's one of the coolest things about it, if you ask me, is that you don't need all the fancy stuff. Of course, I already had some recording gear and a few cameras lying around, but you can do this with a phone, with an iPad. And I remember seeing your setup early on, way before lockdown and all that. And you would have the iPad as an overhead camera, which to me is something that's cool because you can't show a good overhead view in-person lessons. That's kind of something you can only do in the online format. And I love that sort of thing, that sort of silver lining to this situation, I think, is that there are some pros to the online platform that don't apply to the in-person lessons,
Yeah. Just the advantage of, a parent will reach out and say, I can't get home to my son to get him to your lesson. Can we do it online today? So it's that works also. Someone's not feeling well and they don't want to come in person. Of course, they do an online lesson, or they're on vacation. They take their pad, to the cabin or wherever they are, and they can still get their drum time in. So it's very convenient.
Yes. I was actually in Shenandoah a few weeks ago, and I was so excited because I brought my phone and my tripod and my practice pad. And there was no signal out there. So maybe it's not the perfect solution, but it is still pretty exciting.
Yeah, as long as you've got a signal, a good strong Wi-Fi signal, it can work. But there are some pitfalls that we do come across.
Sure. Do you recall having any momentous crash and burn lessons on the online platform early on or at all?
No, actually a few months ago, our electricity went out, during an online lesson. So no electricity, no Wi-Fi, but that was the first time it ever happened. So just that one bump in the road, everything else has been pretty smooth.
Cool. Yeah, I know myself personally, there have been a few times where I was I don't know if I'm communicating, because it's different. It's different, but I think that once you get used to it, it's every bit as useful. And so I also love to see that about teachers that aren't afraid to go after it and to see what can be done in this new realm,
Yeah.
Let's see here. Do you recall your first online student?
I do. And it was someone who I had made friends with through Facebook.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And now actually he's a friend of mine. I consider this guy a friend.
I love it. The internet's pretty amazing.
It is.
Okay, let's see. How about the furthest away student that you've ever taught?
Probably the West Coast, California, Sacramento. I I haven't gone outside of the country yet. So that's the next territory, is to, get outside of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky with time zones, but still doable.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any students that you've never actually met in person?
Yes. Yeah, I have had some students online, from different states that we just, communicate through email or, just, the online lesson, but never met them in person. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
I have a student that I just met for the first time. They actually started online lessons in the middle of quarantine, which is very brave, if you ask me. But they wanted to give it a shot, and it's been going well. And so, anyway, he just got his first drum set, so I actually went over there. I took my mask and helped him set it up and tune it, so that was fun.
I saw that picture this morning.
Cool, yeah. That's like
great.
The best feeling, because I remember my first drum set so clearly. So.
Yeah. You can't see the smile through the mask, but you can read the eyes. You can see that the student was very, very happy that you were there.
Right on.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they couldn't stop playing it.
Of course.
Sort of opened Pandora's box there, I guess.
It's very addictive.
Yeah, oh yeah.
In a good way.
Oh, the best. Unless you talk to the neighbors, they might disagree, but, that's another conversation.
That's how you get to meet your neighbors quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the cops. I've been there. So, what advice do you have to somebody who's new to online teaching, who's nervous, whether they are a music teacher or public school teacher? What would you say to somebody?
It's no different. I mean, it's a lot different, but you have to just be yourself and, ask the right questions with the student and make sure that they understand what you're looking for also, so that you can help them to figure out like where to put the camera or, the volume and all the things that we're looking for, so we can get through to the student to make sure that they're getting the information and we're getting out of them what we can from the lesson. The other struggle is, not playing at the same time. A lot of times in a live lesson, you can play with the student and you're a mirror in front of them or you're side by side, so the student can look over and really, hone in on what you're doing with body language, and you can communicate. Where in an online lesson, it's ping pong. It's like, okay, I'll play and you watch, and, I'll talk a little bit, and then, you send it over to the student. They'll go, no, you try that for a little bit. You just watch and observe and let them play. And, it's a different chemistry.
That's very true. I love what you said about really just being yourself. But yeah, even then there is that, like, I don't want to say communication barrier, but you have to just trust in what you normally do, and then also be able to go with the flow, I think, a little bit sometimes.
Every lesson is different, literally. There are no one way to teach, and there's not one kind of student. They're all different, like a snowflake.
That is so true. Sometimes I feel like I get in a pretty good rhythm, and the back and forth, there's not much lag, and we can actually have a good conversation. Other times I feel like we're interrupting each other, and it's awkward, and we're talking. But like anything, I guess the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and those problems start to fade away.
Yeah, it's like a dance. You're right. You're going to step on some toes, but eventually, the student understands where you're going, and it's a dance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There's rhythm to it.
Definitely. Especially when you're doing drum lessons. A lot of rhythm there.
Yeah.
Let me just take a minute to say hi to the chat.
Absolutely.
Hi, Nikki. How are you? That's my wife. Thanks for tuning in, hon.
Hi, Nikki.
Randy. Randy, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Oh, no. Larry, Randy Cowan has something to say about your shirt. I'll let him take that up with you later.
We button up for Randy.
Guys, if you have any questions for Larry or myself, or any thoughts or advice of your own, please leave it in the chat. If you're watching this later and it's already been recorded, then leave it in the comments section. I'd love to hear your feedback and any other questions that you have for us today or for future episodes. Jonathan, how are you? Welcome back. So, all right. Let's see here. Let's talk silver linings for a minute, because I think a lot of people tend to get hung up on the negative side of online teaching and learning, which, to be fair, there are some concerns, right? And we've already talked about how to overcome some of those concerns. But to me, I love to find the positive in a situation, and I think there's a lot to be said for online teaching, whether it's music lessons or otherwise. Do you have some of your own silver linings or pros that you think online lessons have that maybe even in-person lessons don't have?
The advantage to the online lesson, I really enjoyed watching my students in their practice space on their instrument, getting a sense of, how they set up, what it sounds like, everything. So that was a really important part of the online lessons that I could communicate later. I was able to help a lot of students with their setup. It was surprising that in a lesson at my house, when they're on a drum set that's very comfortable and compact, where I would see something at home, I'm like, why is your tom like way across the room and your floor tom is behind you, and like all these crazy things that you forget to talk about in a lesson about their setup, but when you see it hits home.
That's huge, and I can relate so much to that. I can't tell you how many broken hi-hat stands I've come across. I'm like, what's up with your hi-hat? They're like, oh, I don't know. It's just never worked. I'm like, ask me quick. This is so... while the first few online lessons with each of my students, there was that uncomfortable, awkward, like troubleshooting the equipment or whatever, we got so much done fixing their drums, tuning their drums, that I had no idea that those issues were even there. They would come into the studio in person and they would see how it's set up, and I would assume, okay, you're going to take that back home and tweak your drums, but I was surprised to find out how many things we were able to fix. And on that note of them being in their own comfort zone, I've had a lot of them tell me, like, hey, it's kind of cool that we do our lesson, and then when we get off the call, I'm already sitting down, everything's fresh in my head, I'm going to just keep practicing for an hour. Whereas before, they might have gotten home from their lesson, eaten a snack, gone and done something else, maybe pick up the video game controller. So that's huge. I'm glad you said something about that.
Yeah.
Definitely one for me would be the opportunity to have different camera angles. One issue that I've run up against with online drum lessons specifically is the mirroring effect. So with some of my younger students, I'll say, okay, go ahead and start with your right hand, and they look on their screen and it looks like the hand I raised is on their left. And so sometimes I'll switch to that overhead camera just so they can clearly see right and left.
Yeah.
And again, that's something you can't even get a perspective like that in person unless you were to stand up on a stepladder and look down. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Are there any more silver linings or special circumstances that you've come across?
I can't think of any off top of my head. Every lesson's different. Every student has a different agenda. I mean, they all want to, get better, but, have a lot of different students with different needs.
Do you think there's people out there that would prefer, even once we get back to normal, that would prefer the online format?
Maybe a few. I think definitely most of them, from the feedback I've gotten from parents and students, that they prefer in person.
Mm-hmm. For sure. That seems to be the general consensus. I'm looking forward to actually doing a mix of both. Is that something that you do regularly? Well, you did mention that if your students are sick, they can hop online. So do you see that a lot?
Right now, it's about 80% in studio and 20% online right now.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's too bad about snow days for future generations.
What's a snow day?
Right, exactly. It's a Zoom day, right. A Skype day. Let's talk platforms real quick. What's your favorite that you've used so far? Which ones have you used, and what's your favorite? What's your least favorite?
I've used Zoom, and I've used Skype and FaceTime. I like the Zoom, but not everyone has the Zoom account. So most of them that I'm doing are FaceTime. I think I prefer FaceTime over the Skype. Mm-hmm. I started out doing Skype, and then it just became FaceTime was just really easy with everyone with the phone, and just, the simplicity of it. Right
on. I'm not privy to FaceTime. I don't have an iPhone, but I hear it runs pretty smoothly, low latency and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I did my first few on Skype, and that worked okay. And then I switched to Zoom, and the first couple lessons I was like, I don't like it. It's not Skype. I'm not used to it. But then quickly I got used to Zoom, And now I far and away I love it, and especially now that I'm using it on a computer. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Let's see. I had a follow-up for that, and now I'm blanking. I think we should, whether you're a teacher or a student, you should expect a learning curve there. This is a new aspect of our teaching. It's like any tool or equipment that we would have had before. And so that's just something I wanted to briefly talk about is, to expect that and to not get overwhelmed and just to try to, take one thing at a time. Let's see. Are there any future goals for yourself in terms of online lessons? Things that you're maybe not sure about or trying to improve on yourself? I've got a whole list of myself.
Eventually, I'd like to get to the setup where I've got multiple cameras and can do what you're doing. But right now, it's just simple. I've got a lot going on, so I haven't gotten to that place yet where I'm ready to make the move with the equipment and just the learning curve. But yeah, I would definitely like to step it up and get into the next bracket with the cameras and yeah.
You strike me as the kind of teacher that is so in love with the content and what's going on in the moment so whereas I tend to focus on the technical stuff. So sure, I've got a couple of cameras, but sometimes that's just a distraction in the moment. So I'm actually working on engaging with my students better, making sure I look up at the camera. Sometimes I forget there's a camera there and what that might look like to them if I'm looking down or, stuff like that. So that's where that's where my head's at lately.
Yeah. The truth is that the drums seduce me every day. I wake up and I know I should be doing other things, but I just jump on the drums for an hour or two and I just forget, I should have been researching this or looking up this or doing this. But I'll be honest, I love to play and practice all afternoon.
There have certainly been worse problems, right? That's a great problem to have right there.
Yep.
I love it. When you go to work and you get excited by what you're doing, that's all you can ask for.
Yep. I don't even think of it as work, because when you go to do something you love to do, it's not work anymore. It's just a pleasure of love.
Fair enough.
Yeah. If I didn't have bills and a mortgage and a car payment, I wouldn't charge a person. I love doing what I do. I just, we have to make a living. So, there comes a bill, but it's not a job.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's where you want it. That's the way to be. What's got you excited personally? So we've talked a lot about teaching and lessons. Let me just get to know Larry Rodbell, the person, for a minute. What's got you excited lately, whether it's teaching or otherwise?
Yeah, I do a lot. Right now I'm involved with a project that's starting to come to fruition, and I'm excited. I just can't mention much things. So I've been learning a lot of music and working on a lot of things for the next step. So hopefully we can get the ball rolling and make some type of announcement. But music's what keeps me going. I wake up every day and I just love to play and listen to music and just meet new people. And
well, sounds like you got some exciting things in the works there. I'm definitely curious to see what all that's going on there.
And next weekend is PASIC, so I'm excited about that. I had a Zoom meeting this morning with the drum set committee to go over some details. And this weekend, Friday and Saturday, is PASIC online virtual experience. It's going to be great.
That's pretty cool. Do you know some of what they have planned or how they're going to run that, being that it's online?
Yeah, there's different blocks. If you go to pas.org, you can see the schedule. But there's clinics and workshops and panel discussions with all top drummers and educators from all different styles of music. So it's all day Friday and Saturday. If you're not able to watch it, you can watch it up till the end of the year. Like most of the online events nowadays. So that's next weekend. So I'm excited about that. Always have new students starting, and there's always something new. Even in these darkest times, I kept going through, the pandemic, and I'm still able to work. So I'm very fortunate that life is good.
Absolutely. Can relate.
Yeah.
Have you run into any issues with your students' motivation levels? One thing I almost expected students to have more time and to want to practice because there's only so much that you can do being stuck at home. But I almost one thing I didn't take into account early on was I think that the stress that a lot of people are under, and come to find out, a lot of their school teachers are giving them pretty heavy course loads and workloads, that they're almost more stressed than ever, and it's like they're challenged enough. So I've kind of adjusted my approach just to try to let them have a bit of fun during the lesson. What's your experience with that in the students' motivation levels?
I agree with that 100%. So before COVID, I always ran my lessons like a meal, like an appetizer, main course, and dessert. So we work on our rudiments and our hands and the pads as our appetizer. And then the main course is the drum set and the reading and whatever we need to work on to move forward as a player. And then the dessert is playing music and a song or a solo, something that you take the first two things and dump it into the last one. So through COVID, I found out that, when students were getting kind of down and depressed, we kind of stepped back and just talked about music more. Like, okay, let's find some songs that can inspire you. And the music is the carrot. And if the student loves music, they're going to want to love to play the drums and music, or, practice the drums and play music. If they don't love music, I find that their drumming they don't know why they're even practicing. So I put a heavy stress on the music.
That's huge. I feel like you just dropped a bunch of little golden nuggets right there alone. So, guys, if you're watching this later, maybe go back and rewind that and pick up on a lot of it. But those are some great points. It's just primarily, how can you best serve the student? The student, I think, is what it's all about. That's really cool.
And they're all ages. I teach from age 5 to 75. So the younger students that, aren't like reading, we make it fun. And the students who are older and don't want to read, I asked the student in the beginning, like, why are you here? What do you want to do? What do you want to learn? Let's carve out a curriculum and move forward and have fun, because it's not like you learn it and you've got it. It's a lifelong journey. So if you put too much stress into it in the beginning, you're going to burn out fast. So I kind of make it light, but yet informative, and moving forward and always turning the pages, as I call it. It's turning some pages.
Yeah. Right on. It's the balance. Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, that's life, I guess.
I couldn't tell you how many times in a lesson I'll say out loud or in my head, hey, Johnny, that wasn't a drum lesson. That was a life lesson. There's so many things that relate to life through music, through drumming.
Yes. I found
That's
myself
how I live.
Right on. I found myself in situations where I'm like, okay, what would I tell my students to do? And then I make myself go and do that because it probably applies.
Yeah.
That's funny. Let me ask you about, so you just mentioned you teach a wide age range of students. Okay.
Yes.
How would what's your experience with the age range in terms of online? You would expect that kids are going to be a lot more comfortable with it. They're doing it every day in school. But maybe the younger kids are going to have even a harder time with it. What's your experience with that?
In studio, I always recommend that the 5, 6, 7-year-old students, the parents, kind of hang out in the lesson so they can kind of see what we're working on, so they can work with their son or daughter at home. So on the online lesson, it was the same thing. Like the parents were like with the student, so they could help them with the technical stuff, or just getting situated, because they're the little kids. Mm-hmm. But it is different for every student. So some of the older students would be working on something different than maybe someone in their 20s who've been playing maybe a little bit longer. And again, it's all different. Some of the older students are beginners. Some of them have been playing for years, but took a break in life and have come back to it. So it's literally every lesson is different.
Right on.
Yeah.
Myself, I've had to balance how much of a stickler I am for certain things like camera angle. There are some of my students who get it right away. They're like, okay, I need to position this in a way where you can see. And some of my other ones that are not quite there yet, I'm looking at their feet, or I'm looking over here, this and that. And I've had to, I guess, pick my battles there and, take it one step at a time. But it's definitely been quite a journey. I think this whole situation has moved us all into a new realm that we might have gotten to eventually, but it's gotten us there a lot quicker, I would say. So I've just been so excited to have you on the show, because you took that dive years ago. You built your own teaching studio, both in person and online, and I think that's just the coolest thing in the world. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today and giving us your experience and your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Absolutely. Let me check in with the chat again, see if we have any questions. Yeah, Nikki had a good point about the different time zones being able to expand your teaching schedule. You're no longer limited to your own local area. And this applies mostly to, I would say, independent music teachers, as we search for students. But that's definitely a good point. Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, Jonathan. Jonathan said that's why it's effective to encourage the students with their favorite music. I absolutely agree. And I think that's more of, and Larry, to get back to your point of tailoring the lessons to the students' wants and really finding their own personal balance of enjoyment versus, being a drill sergeant. I think that's the modern way. And I think the old school way of, discipline first is really wearing off and not sticking for good reason, I would say.
When I started teaching, I wanted to be the teacher I never had. I had a lot of teachers that were very military-esque. And it was page 5 at 90 beats per minute, and then go down to the next one. And it was very sterile. And, I'm not that teacher. So when I started teaching, I went to be the teacher I was always looking for when I was younger, someone who was more laid back, but yet informative and pushing me forward without being a drill sergeant. So you have to walk a line and get to know the student in the beginning for a couple of weeks before you really start to figure out how you're going to address their lesson.
That's awesome. Do you find that you're able to feel confident in finding that balance? Do you sometimes question yourself in that regard? How's that for you?
I feel pretty confident with it. I think I'm a listener and an observer. So in the first few lessons, I'm able to get a good read on the student to see, how we're going to develop the relationship student-teacher and move forward and learn together.
That's a really good point. I sometimes forget about that myself, that everyone has a different learning style. And so I think that's something I'm working on as a teacher myself. Although we could have a whole conversation on that as we're getting outside of the realm of the online teaching. But I've got questions for you about, specifically drum teaching as well, but maybe we'll save those for another chat. I think that's about all the thoughts and the questions that I had on the topic. Do you have anything that you'd like to follow up with, Larry?
I don't think so. I mentioned PASIC is this weekend, Friday and Saturday. There's still tickets available. PAS.org. There's a great lineup. David Garibaldi, Gavin Harrison's playing, Marco Miniman, Brian Fraser Moore, and they just added Will Cahoon. So, and there's going to be a lot of great panel discussions, and don't miss it.
That's going to be legendary. Yeah. I might watch it. Drums aside, I might watch it just to see logistically how they run the whole thing, because that's kind of what I'm curious about. Oh, looks
Definitely
like we have
check it out.
Will do. It looks like we have a question from Randy in the chat for both of us, since we're drummers. Randy asks, being a drummer, holding it down in the rhythm section, what bass player would you like to play with? I imagine this is anytime bass player. What bass player would you like to play with? I'm going to let you take this one first, Larry.
Ooh. If I could play with any bass player, I'd love to play with Geezer Butler.
Okay.
From Black Sabbath.
Right on. What do you like about his style?
I just love his sound and the way he plays, and grew up on Sabbath, so like all those bass lines are just in my head.
Nice. For me, it would be a tie between Flea from the Chili Peppers or Victor Wooten, just to see what that experience would be like.
Yeah, speaking of Victor Wooten, I don't know if the same guy, Randy, is the guy who asked the question, but I went to a bass clinic with my friend Randy years ago. It was Victor Wooten. And I had as much fun at that bass clinic as I do at drum clinics, because he kept referencing drummers and talking about listen to the drummer. And it was just like a really cool experience. So I recommend to drummers is go check out bass clinics and guitar clinics, and you'll get something out of it.
That is such a good idea. And yeah. That reminds me, kind of off topic, but in terms of social media and kind of content creating, as you do, I know you're very active on Instagram and Facebook. Someone pointed out recently that you should also go and take inspiration from other communities outside of drumming. So that's a really neat point that you bring up right there. Speaking of social media, where can people find you? I know you've mentioned you've got some really exciting things in the works that you can't talk about yet, but where can they follow you to eventually find out more?
My website, rodbelldrums.com. my business page on Facebook, Rodbell Drums Teaching Studio, all separate words, and Instagram, Larry Rodbell Drummer. And I guess that's about it.
Awesome. Guys, I've got all these up on screen, by the way. This is just for those of you that are just listening but not following along. That's where you can find Larry. Cool. I think that's all I've got on the topic for today. This has been really insightful, and I've really enjoyed our talk, Larry. Thank you for your time and for joining us.
You're welcome. If anyone has any questions, they can reach me through my website, or through the comments here. Yeah.
Guys, he's the nicest person you'll ever meet and a solid rock star. So I highly recommend it.
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely, Larry. Guys, join us next week. We'll be talking about more stuff, and stay tuned for better online lessons. See you next time. Bye, Larry.
Thanks, Chris. See ya.